Well, hi everyone. I'm John Retlin with a retro review of WCW Nitro from April 24th, 2000. 2 days before David Arquette would win the world title. And also, David Arquette appeared in a match on this episode. I want to make it clear that I have nothing but respect for David Arquette, the actor, the wrestling fan, the human being. He has been through a lot, but he has overcome that, and he is a very passionate wrestling fan. A wrestling fan for life. He's loved it. You can see that in his eyes. You can see that he enjoyed this. And if you hear interviews with him and hear interviews with others that were involved, like DDP, like he didn't want to win the world title, and WCW brass, namely Russo, thought it was a good idea to give him the championship. But that's for the episode of Thunder that I'll be reviewing a little bit later. So how was this episode? It was atrocious. WCW by this point had completely spiraled out of control, and no matter how much talent they had, they couldn't do anything right because Vince Russo didn't respect wrestling, never respected wrestling. I have a pretty good idea never respected any of the wrestlers, and this episode is proof of it. And also, the commentary was kind of all over the place because by this point, Shivani and Hudson, as good as they were, just had kind of checked out. And also you have the WCW.com staff involved in on this episode, which leads to a kind of funny segment with Tank Abbott. So there were 8 matches on this show. And this is a 2-hour show. You know, with commercials cut out, it was like 90, 91 minutes. And the longest match was a handicap match. It involved Hulk Hogan. I would argue that that actually was probably longer than any of the matches put together on this show. And that match still only lasted 7-8 minutes. That's how little wrestling mattered, you know, the match quality from bell to bell on TV in WCW in 2000. It was absolutely baffling. Having some talking segments, having some stuff and whatever was fine, but if you're not going to make a wrestling show centered around wrestling where at least half of it is wrestling, then what the fuck are you doing? So, boom, Sting and Vampiro are fighting backstage, or brawling backstage, and Vampiro hits Sting with a bat. This would be an overlying theme that would go to the main event that would last 3 minutes. We get Terry Funk and Bam Bam Bigelow battling for the Hardcore Championship. Ernest Miller interferes, and eventually Terry Funk wins. I'm not going to be spending a lot of time analyzing these matches because they weren't very good, and they also weren't very long. I also do not understand why Ernest Miller, besides being a friend with Bischoff, was ever given a chance in WCW. Nepotism running wild. That's why Horace Hogan, who I don't know if he's a bad guy or not, had a job in WCW. That's why Bruce Beefcake had a job in WCW. And fucking Christ, Ernest Miller couldn't cut a goddamn promo. I mean, his promos were better than his work. And I'm not saying he wasn't an athlete, but he wasn't an interesting character on TV. So, yeah, it lasted maybe 3 minutes. I don't even know if it lasted that long. This is a terrible use of Bam Bam Bigelow. And then we get footage of last week, if you didn't see the episode that I reviewed, the Nitro episode, where Kidman had got, thrown in a dumpster, and then Hogan hit the white Hummer into the dumpster. That was the same episode where at the end, they stopped it just before Bret Hart swung a chair at either Hogan or Bischoff. Well, he ended up hitting Hogan with it, which I'm sure felt very satisfying to Bret, as Hulk Hogan was very detrimental to his career in 1993 because Hulk Hogan wouldn't put anybody over. Because, God forbid, Hogan put somebody over. God forbid Hogan have any kind of perspective like he should respect people or respect, certain things that are going on in world events, but I digress. We had Bret hitting Hogan with a chair. We didn't see Bret at all. Bret's appearances would be very sporadic because he had post-concussion issues. He couldn't wrestle anymore. He would only, I think the last time he appeared was sometime in September of 2000, and then they let his contract run out. He basically got paid for almost the last year of his contract to sit at home. And it's just terrible how his health took dips after that. I'm just glad to see he recovered from that stroke a couple years later. So we get Kidman with Tori, and he's got his ribs taped after the dumpster fire bullshit, or well, it might as well have been a dumpster fire. And he challenges Hogan for Slamboree, because it's worked out so well for Kidman before. Yes, let's challenge. Kidman did not benefit from this feud with Hogan. I don't know whose idea it was, because featuring young talent is not a bad idea, but Hogan was never known for putting over young talent, at least not the right way. And people can say, oh, but he put over The Rock. The Rock was already an established name. It's putting over people that could actually really benefit from it. Anyway, here's Jarrett and Bischoff and Kimberly. And Jarrett talks about the 3-tier cage match that they're going to have, and Kimberly wants a divorce. And DDP comes out and says, oh, I'll sign these papers, but after I shove them down Bischoff's throat. This is late Jerry Springer bullshit. And then We get a guitar shot, and then we get Arquette attacking Bischoff, and then we get Canyon coming in making the save. Positively Canyon. Well, actually, become Positively Canyon later. Don't worry, I'll review Slamboree, which took place in the same venue that Owen Hart passed away in the year before. And boy, that Canyon bump, sweet Christ. Oh boy. We then get Arquette talking to Bischoff, basically. Well, Bischoff's like, you want to come in here and do this? How about we have a match? And it's like, oh, I'm going to 1-800 kick your ass. Yeah, okay, it wasn't great. But again, Arquette was a passionate fan, and him being involved like this wasn't an issue. It was just the follow-up, which he didn't want to do once again. We then get Candido with and Tammy versus the Artist and Paisley, the artist formerly known as Prince Iukea. The fact that Tammy was involved in any kind of goddamn match at all in her career was embarrassing. Tammy the Tramp, as she should be called. Somebody that wants to rail against people that did sex work and they're no longer here, but God forbid, she do something like me, do Skype calls where nobody with any kind of decency should ever want to see whatever the fuck she's got left. Like a bunch of Arby's left out in the goddamn sun. So anyway, yeah, this match happened where Candido he hit Paisley with a clothesline, and Tammy covered 1, 2, 3. Candido would have benefited so much better from not having Tammy involved in his life, especially in his wrestling career. She was so fucking detrimental to him, and so many others. Such a fucking piece of shit. Anyway, Chronic then yells at Russo, and Russo says, you need to sit down and listen to me. And then, well, that actually happened before that match, but that's how disjointed this show is. Sting then comes down, lays out Candido, and then he wants Vampiro in the first blood match. We then get Chronic versus Flair and Luger. Flair's still in street clothes, and Miss Hancock shows up. And then we get Bagwell and Douglas interfering, the current WCW Tag Team Champions. And then Chronic pins Flair, and then they attack Douglas and Bagwell, which leads to a tag title match a little bit later. This match maybe went 2 minutes. Bischoff then says he will be the referee for Hogan versus Kidman at Slamboree. This company was so fucked by this point. We then get Kidman and Mike Awesome versus Hogan. It was supposed to be Hogan and a tag team partner, but nope, 2-on-1. And this match, it may have gone 6 minutes, may have gone 8 minutes, may have gone 10, but it felt like it went forever. And yeah, there were certain matches that went way too short. But Hogan, of course, dominated most of this. And then Kidman and Awesome eventually got the upper hand. They busted Hogan open. He did make a comeback, but then he gets powerbombed through a table, and then we get a splash through the other table. And Nash, at this point, gets into the arena and sees what's happening, and then makes the save, coming down to help Hogan, not a moment too late. And he gets laid out because Torrie hits a low blow, and then they attack his ankle because he had been on crutches a couple weeks before. Cool, all right. Mike Awesome had already been cooled off by this point, which is really sad. I'm not saying that Mike Awesome was a great promo, because he really wasn't. He wasn't terrible, he just wasn't a great promo. He wasn't a natural talker, but being an ass kicker and just this kind of insanely strong monster and very agile, they could have done so much more with him, and no, they make him the fat chick thriller a little bit, which was just a whole other can of worms that I'll get into when we get to that point in WCW. Because I have made it clear that unless I just absolutely lose my mind, or unless a giant meteor hits the Earth, or unless something catastrophic happens, I'm going to be reviewing every single Nitro episode. Thunder, I don't know about Thunder. I don't know if I can subject myself to that much bad WCW TV in addition to all the other stuff I do, but who knows? We'll see. At least all the Nitro episodes and all the pay-per-views. That's including 1990s, 1995s, and 2000s pay-per-views. So we then get David Arquette with DDP versus Eric Bischoff with Jeff Jarrett and Kimberly. It was a comedy match, and eventually when Bischoff was holding Arquette, Jarrett swung the guitar, hit Bischoff in the head, and we get a big old schmoz, and then Arquette wins. And the stipulation was here that if Arquette beat Bischoff, DDP would get a world championship match with Jeff Jarrett in a steel cage later that night. This was all happening where they were just like, we're just going to literally throw everything at the goddamn wall to see what sticks, and about one thing stuck. And it was shit. That's not Arquette's. That's not knocking Arquette. I'm talking all the, the haphazard bullshit that they kept doing. So, lights out. What the hell's going on? They're all celebrating, and Sting's up in the balcony, wanting an answer from Vampiro. And then we get Scott Steiner talking about his freaks, roller coasters, and going to New York to look for Booker T. And then Booker T talks more and says to the freaks, once you go black, you never go back. And then Scott Steiner, in a line that has not aged all that well, kept saying, as he was beating down a black man, kept saying, come on, boy, get up, boy, come on, boy. Oh, boy. Oh, boy. This was not good. They always had decent matches, but this was, whatever. I don't know. Maybe I'm just analyzing too much of this stuff. So we get Chronic versus Shane Douglas and Buff Bagwell, WCW Tag Team Championship match. The bell never even rang. Russo was on commentary, ruining things. Vince Russo ruins just about any segment he's involved in. And then he attacks Chronic with a bat. The fact that they had to sell for this little, buggy whipped, idiot that couldn't even fucking do anything, never been in a fight in his goddamn life, and cowered at everything. The fact that he was allowed to get in any offense on anybody without getting completely laid out was ridiculous. And then he counts down, and Douglas and Bagwell retain. We then get Tank Abbott coming out and calling out Goldberg. He scared the commentary team, including Mark Madden, which makes sense because anytime Madden was confronted by anybody, he would get scared. To be fair, Abbott is a very scary individual, but Hudson and Schiavone shockingly, not so shockingly, doing the right thing and running away. But then Tank Abbott decides to go over to the WCW.com table, and he beats up Bob Ryder, which, knowing some stuff about Bob Ryder, it's a good thing he did. It's a good thing he beat up that piece of shit, assaulter. And if you read up about Bob Ryder, it adds up. And then Borash tries to make the save, and he beats him up. So, God, no wonder Tank Abbott wasn't brought into TNA. Or if he was, no wonder he wasn't allowed there for very long. Oh, yeah, this was stuff that was actually put on a cable broadcast. We then get DDP versus Jarrett. It's a steel cage match for the WCW Championship. They brawled in the crowd for about a minute and a half. They got in the cage for about a minute and a half. Maybe. And then Diamond Cutter, Awesome, and Kidman try to get in the ring to stop the count. But 1, 2, and even though they stopped the count, 3, DDP is the new WCW champion. That's what they're doing now. Jarrett held the championship for 8 days. Jarrett should have never held the WCW championship anyway because he was goddamn atrocious. And, well, at least atrocious as far as a main eventer. He was a fine worker, but he was never a main eventer. And then, yeah, that was it. It was like a 3-minute cage match. I don't even know if it was that long. And then we get Sting versus Vampiro, first blood match, and they're brawling because Sting, repelled, came down to the ring on the cable, and they're brawling a bit, and then Sting's in the ring, in the middle of the ring, and Vampiro does this, does the throw thing and does this, and then the blood from the new blood comes down, like all this, corn syrupy goodness. Same stuff they use for the pig's blood in Carrie. I'll be doing a retro review of Final Destination, almost like Final Fantasy, Final Destination and the Scream movies at some point, because why not? So this is where Sting got covered in a whole bunch of blood. And then Vampiro, I think, was going to give him the nail in the coffin, but didn't want to slip, so he just slammed him. And then Bagwell, Douglas, and I think Candido, I want to say it was Candido, I don't know who else, came out and they were all brawling. They were all beating down Sting, and then they put him on the cable and then brought him up a bit, so he's all bloody, hanging and everything there. And I don't know why this happened. I don't know how this could have been cleared. And I mean, even looking back, because WWE was doing bullshit like, crucifying Steve Austin and stuff like that. And I'm not even a religious person, but that just wasn't good. It wasn't entertaining television. But this bullshit was, this is stuff that was actually put on cable TV, and it was fucking shit, and it wasn't wrestling. And it's memorable for all the wrong reasons. That's the thing about WCW 2000. It's memorable for all the wrong reasons. So yeah, you guys can expect a review. I'm probably just going to put up the Thunder episode right after I put up this one, so you can get the nice 1-2 punch of me being a little angry. But if you think that I was angry before about them giving Arquette the world title, don't worry. I will make sure to turn it all the way up to 11. Anyway, agree, disagree, what I said. Like, share, subscribe, Twitter handle that is, in the description. I'm John Ritlin. I'll see you soon.